Merry Christmas, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Chef AJ Live. I'm your host, Chef AJ, and this is where I introduce you to amazing people like you who are doing great things in the world that I think you should know about. First, I want to thank Chef Ramses Bravo, who's been on the show many times, for these wonderful holiday earrings. Look, they look like Santa Claus. There's not a lot of days I can wear them. Hey, if you want any earrings, I can hook you up because he makes a lot of them. So today's guest is going to make a delicious Christmas meal. I don't know what she's making, but I know it's going to be delicious because she's been on the show before. She's one of my favorite chefs because she cooks the way I eat, without oil, without sugar, and salt, always optional. And I know she's got a new book coming out pretty soon. I cannot wait to see it. Please welcome Vicki Brett-Gach. Nice to see you again.
Thank you so much, Chef AJ. Merry Christmas. It's so great to be with all of you today. And I've got lots of things we're going to be preparing, so I'm going to get busy right away. And we are going to start with a holiday meal that begins with roasted butternut squash and onions, which is one of my favorites. I love butternut squash, especially this time of year. I can't get enough of it. So we're going to start with a package of butternut squash that's already been diced. I like to buy it already diced. This is from Trader Joe's. It's a 2-pound package. You can sometimes find it, in variety of stores, but I love to get this already diced because it's just hard on the wrist to get a whole butternut squash and begin to peel it and dice it. But sometimes I do that as well because that's a nice way to have it brand new, fresh, and ready to go. But when I can find it already diced, I love that option. So we've got it chopped in, roughly 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch pieces. And to that, I am just going to, this is a really simple recipe. It's barely a recipe, but it's so delicious that I just love to include it on a Christmas menu or any holiday menu. And to that, I'm adding simply a diced onion. So we've got butternut squash and onions, and you can add a chopped beet to this. It's delicious. The color is beautiful. You could add any other kind of vegetable you like. I like adding beets lots of times because the color, is so beautiful with it's like jewels with the butternut squash, but also it is very forgiving in terms of the amount of time that it takes to bake, because if you kind of can't over bake or roast beets. And so you can kind of just go by when your onions and butternut squash are ready. But today I'm just doing the butternut squash and onions, not adding beets, but you can definitely do it both ways. This is how simple our dinner is going to begin. I'm going to put this into the oven with just a splash of water or not for about 45 to 55 minutes, just until it's about the color, caramelized color that you like. 1 or 2 times during baking, I may stir it just to make sure nothing's sticking too much. And so we're going to stick it into a 400-degree oven. And I've got one that I just baked right before we went on air here. And we've got this beautiful caramelized butternut squash and onions, beautiful on our platter, beautiful for leftovers, which we'll talk more about as well. Wonderful on top of a salad. It's just a fantastic add-in to any kind of holiday meal. So that is our first dish.
That looks
literally
amazing. That looks
done.
I mean, it's so simple, and you didn't even put any spices on it. Really, anybody can do this.
You really don't need to. I thought I would show that you can add. I have some red pepper flakes. You could add a little bit of red pepper flakes. You could add some fresh herbs, a little black pepper, a little bit of vinegar if you wanted to, but really it's just delicious, just as is, along with the other things we'll be having tonight. So we've got our butternut squash. We'll plate this in a little bit. And next we're going to get started on our main dish, which is a lentil shepherd's pie covered with mashed potatoes. So the first thing we're going to do is get our onions sauteing. Just turning my oven, my range on, my stove. And I just want to show you, just before we came on air, I started to saute some onions with some celery. I've got 1 chopped onion and 2 stalks of celery, and I just got it started on here to get the process started to tenderize the onions. I just want them kind of translucent for that first step. And then we're going to add some other things to it to turn it into a delicious lentil stew. It's so good. I can just eat it by the spoon, but we're going to save it for our pie. So
many people think you need oil I'm sorry for interrupting, but it just, we have to get this point across that your onions will caramelize without oil. People don't understand.
Absolutely.
It's a waste of calories. It's a waste of money. It's not necessary. It's
so true. They turn nice and golden brown without any oil. All you need is a little bit of thyme, T-I-M-E, just a little bit of thyme, some heat, and they begin to caramelize. Just they naturally do that. So you can add a splash of water. I actually did add a splash of vegetable broth as well, just to kind of get things started, but it works just fine on its own as well, because the heat releases the moisture in the onions. And so they begin to caramelize without anything at all. Just give them a couple of stirs and you're well on your way. So I will say that in my experience, caramelizing onions on the stove takes just slightly longer with water or with no oil compared to the old days when I used to use oil. I think it might have been slightly faster with the oil, but it's so not worth the price of using oil. And once you stop using oil, as you know, Chef AJ, oil becomes kind of gross. It's just greasy and icky. So happily, I'm not using any in any of these recipes. So our next step, while we've got our onions started, because we're going to do some multitasking here, is to mash some potatoes. So I have an Instant Pot over here. And just to get things started, what I did was take 5 pounds of potatoes and peel them and add a couple of sweet potatoes about this size, probably about 8 ounces or so, to the white potatoes. So I've got a mixture of sweet potatoes and white, and that's what I'm going to mash today. And I've got some seasoning. I've got some onion powder, some garlic and black pepper. You don't need to add this if you don't want to, but it's just going to get the party started a little bit with flavor. And what I've done, you can boil potatoes and get them ready for mashing any way you want. And I'm actually making probably more potatoes than I'm going to need, but I can always use leftover potatoes, so I never mind that. But I want to make sure I've got plenty, and while I'm at it, I always just do 5 pounds at a time. So I've got my potatoes in here, which I started in an Instant Pot with 2 cups of water. I brought it all up to pressure, high pressure, for about 20 minutes and let it all come down to pressure. And at the end of that time, we've got soft potatoes that are ready to go. So I'll just show you here one of my potatoes. I'm going to pick it up with my fingers. It's warm. I've got a potato, and I've got some sweet potato. And inside here, I've just got all the water it's been sitting in. And I used to drain that water off and then start with adding back in liquid. But now I just use that liquid. It's just potato water. It's got nutrients in it. It's got just the flavor of the potatoes. So that's where I start to mash my potatoes. And to that, I add a little bit of non-dairy milk. I use soy milk, which is organic soybeans and water. I add just a splash. I'm going to say maybe half a cup. I don't usually really measure, but approximately that amount, just until you get a texture that's nice and fluffy. So here's where I'm going to use a little bit of my elbow grease to get these potatoes beginning to mash. And we're going to just get them nice and creamy.
I agree. I just use the water from the potatoes too. It's just.
Yeah, I used to throw that water out, and it kind of occurred to me along the way that is just a great base to get these to the texture that I'm looking for. And they may be a little bit striped with that sweet potato in it, which is so pretty. And I'm just going to mash, mash, mash. It'll take me just a minute or two here. And of course, if you don't want them super creamy and are happy with them just kind of lumpy and smashed, they're still delicious. So it's kind of whatever kind of texture you like. I find that mashed potatoes are something that I cannot get enough of. So it's kind of a staple. I always have them in my refrigerator. I have them for literally breakfast, lunch, and dinner sometimes. And that, along with a vegetable or a salad, makes a great simple meal. But for this special holiday, we want to have something even better. So we've got our mashed potatoes. And just like that, we've got what we need here, which is just creamy mashed potatoes ready to go for our topping for our lentil shepherd's pie. So I'm just going to put that to the side for just a second while we move on to our next item.
Yeah, I think I have the exact same potato masher as you.
Do you?
I think so.
Okay.
I also use it for bananas, like if I'm making something with bananas.
Absolutely, I do too. Bananas for all kinds of baked goods whenever I need to use bananas for my sweetener. So now we've got our mashed potatoes ready to go. We've got our onions sauteing. And so now we're ready to do our lentil mixture. So we've got, as I showed before, we've got the starch, just our base of sauteed onions and celery, and just a dash of broth to get us a little base for our next items. And now I'm going to add a diced zucchini, around 8 ounces or so. So in a nice small 1/2-inch dice or so. So I'm going to add that to this mixture. And on top of that, I'm going to add some lentils. And I'm just using, you could certainly start from scratch. I just am using the convenience of canned organic lentils. It's just lentils only, not even salt added. So it's really a nice product to have just for a handy add-in. And so I've got 2 cans, which I drained, even though there's no salt on it. I'm going to add 2 cans of cooked lentils to my pan. You won't believe how easy this is, Chef AJ. It's just everything goes into one pan here. And then what we're going to do is take the rest of our steps are going to be involved just seasoning. So now I'm going to add a teaspoon of cumin to this. Cumin and lentils are such a nice mix. They really have the cumin just brings out that nice smoky flavor. So we're going to add that to it. And then now we're going to add just a couple of liquids as well. I've got 1 tablespoon of Bragg's liquid aminos. You could use broth if you didn't want to use that. Now I'm using some broth, which is 3 tablespoons of broth, 3 tablespoons of red wine. This is just leftover wine. If you want to avoid any alcohol, you could certainly use broth instead for both of those liquids, or just use water if you didn't even want to use broth. And the last item I'm adding is some Date Lady, my favorite, sweet chili sauce. And this has a little garlic in it, a little sweetener, some vinegar, and some nice background spices. So I'm mixing that in as well.
You know, I've seen those canned lentils at Sprouts.
Yes, and you can find them at, any health food store, or really even in my Kroger, my local grocery store. And so now I'm just mixing these in, and we've got our nice mixture of the lentils, the zucchini, along with the onions and celery, and all of these delicious flavors. And now I'm going to put this back on the heat on the stove to begin to just boil, kind of simmer just a little bit. We're going to bring it to a simmer, and as we do, I'll stir it a couple of times just to get it to kind of blend the flavors nice and evenly, and every flavor kind of married together. And then we're going to do one final step at the end, and that's to add some fresh greens to it, so that now we've got lentils and greens inside of that pie, which just makes it even better. And so what I did was I'm always looking for shortcuts with convenience and healthy foods. So I just got a 1-pound package of baby spinach, organic baby spinach that's already pre-washed. I used half of it already for the first version of the pie that I just made right before we went on today, but I'm making another one for you to see how I'm doing it. And so this will go in next. And while we're waiting for our vegetables with the lentils to just begin to simmer, we're going to prep our pan. And we just have a couple of easy steps with this. And one is that we take a 9x13 pan like this and sprinkle it with breadcrumbs. 3/4 cup of breadcrumbs. I'm using just Ezekiel bread. You could use any kind of breadcrumbs you like, or even something other than breadcrumbs. If you wanted to use oats instead, you could. If you wanted to use chickpea crumbs. You could use anything you like. It's just going to add a little bit of a layer under here for us of something that will absorb any extra liquid and just kind of help to, we're not adding any thickeners at all. So this is just kind of helping to create a lovely texture for our sauce. So there we are. We've got our breadcrumb spread in our pan. And our next thing that we'll be doing is adding, so again, that's 3/4 of a cup of breadcrumbs. I made these myself, just taking some Ezekiel bread and putting it into a food processor and just grinding it into crumbs. And it's just a nice, handy way to know exactly what you're eating. And so now we're going to take our lentils, our lentil mixture, which is already boiling for me. Just starting to simmer nicely. We want it to be just one step farther along, but now I'm going to take my greens, and this is about 8 ounces of spinach. You could use kale. I've used kale. I've used power greens, any kind of mixture you like. And I did a rough chop of it so that any bite you get will be kind of mouth sized and you won't have anything too long in your on your fork. But I'm just going to cover now the pan, the lentils that are simmering with these greens. So we're really just kind of taking, again, kind of a shortcut, everything all in one pan to make this delicious stew. And we're almost there. All we have to really do is just kind of blend this. So as it starts to simmer, I'm going to fold in the greens. I'm just looking for them to wilt. And it'll just take about a minute. So I'll do this a few times because I'll keep this moving as it needs to be, as it kind of wilts down. So since we're multitasking here, the next thing we're going to add to our menu, along with our hearty lentil shepherd's pie and our roasted butternut squash and onions, is some steamed Brussels sprouts, because the more green, the better. So I started by just getting 2 packages. So we're using 2 pounds of Trader Joe's Brussels sprouts. Super easy, already washed. And I'm just taking these Brussels sprouts and taking off the bottoms, just the tough bottom at the end, and just slicing them in half like this. So we've got a Brussels sprout that looks this easy, and I'm just dumping it together into one container. So we're going to have 2 pounds together. I mean, you can make 1 pound, you can make 3 pounds, whatever your family is going to want to enjoy. But, you know, we go through Brussels sprouts pretty fast. So I'm just going to make 2 pounds of this, cut them each in half, taking off the bottoms. Sometimes if they're a giant one, I might put it, you know, divide it into quarters. Sometimes you've got a couple of tough outer leaves, so maybe you might pull off a leaf or two, but it's all good.
I like that you just cut them without cutting the end off, because I find when you cut the end off, then all the leaves fall off.
Yeah, I think that's right. So we're just going to put all of our Brussels into our pan here. And I've got this is just a steamer that I'm going to put on top of one of my skillets that I have a little bit of water boiling. So in other words, you could use a silicone steamer, any shape that fits your pan, but I'm just using a skillet with this giant size steaming pan that goes right on top. And I'm just going to add, make sure we've got all of our good ones here. If there's anything that doesn't look so fresh, we'll leave that behind. But now I've just got a pan full of Brussels sprouts that have been cut in half, and I'm sticking this on some boiling water, turning down the heat just a dash. And I'm covering it. We'll turn it down just a little, and I'm going to time it for 7 minutes. There's no right or wrong about how you like to eat your Brussels sprouts. About 7 minutes is about right for me. And, you know, Brussels sprouts are great roasted or air fried. They're really good anyway, but I thought this would be kind of a nice texture, nice and fresh next to the roasted and baked items that we're going to be having as well. And so now we've got that moving along. we're about ready to assemble our pie. So let me give a toss to all of this spinach. Oh yeah, just about right. We just got another couple of stirs here. It's all coming together. And of course, besides the wilting the spinach, I'm also looking to get that zucchini just a little bit tender. It's going to bake in the oven, so I don't have to worry too much about it. But I want to give it a nice head start and kind of boil off a little bit, you know, sort of simmer off, reduce the liquid in here as well, which will give it even more flavor. So I'd say just one more minute on here while we're gathering for our next dish, which is going to be to kind of assemble this and get it in the oven, and then prepare our sweet ending to our meal. So we'll just give this another stir or two. I wish you could smell this, Chef AJ. It smells so good. The lentils, the greens, the onions, you could add garlic, you could add mushrooms. Really, this is kind of a template to add whatever you like to it as well. But I love this for a main dish for a holiday. We often have this for Thanksgiving. You can have this for New Year's, but it's just a really nice dish for Christmas as well, or any of the winter holidays, because it's so hearty. So people don't miss what they think of as a main dish for the holidays when they've got something that is going to look like this. So here we go. We've got, just grab my oven mitts. And now we've got this beautiful stew. Here, I'm going to see if I can get it closer to the camera. We've got this beautiful lentil stew with all of these vegetables and greens. And now I'm just going to literally pour it all into the casserole. Nice and easy. I'm going to smooth this out. This becomes our base. This is not a difficult recipe at all. It just has a couple of steps, but it's so good that I should make it more often than just at the holidays, but it tends to be kind of a holiday dish for me. And so now we've got this nice and flat, ready for our next layer. And that's our potatoes. So we've got these wonderful mashed potatoes that now we're just going to cover, smother our base with. There's no such thing as too much mashed potatoes. We're just going to cover it all up here. If we use them all, that's fine too. And you can make this as one large casserole like I am here with a 9 by 13. You can also make 2 pans out of it using like a 9-inch pie plate. And in fact, when you do it that way, you can actually make one now and freeze one.
I was
So
going
at
to say,
this point,
if you freeze it, and if you freeze it, do you freeze it before or after baking?
you could probably do either, but I always freeze it first. And what I would do is let this cool quickly and then freeze it at this point. When I'm going to freeze it, I let the layers, cool before I assemble it because it'll take longer to cool off. But at this point, now that it's all assembled, is when we would freeze it. And then what I do for baking this, if it's frozen, is take it out for, a little ahead of the time that you're going to bake it. And then it bakes longer because of course it's frozen than it would if you were cooking it when you assembled it. And I find that it takes maybe double to 3 times. So when we're about to bake this one, it'll take 35 to 40 minutes. If we were to freeze it, we're going to instead cook it for an hour and a half or so. So about 90 minutes. So here we are with this beautiful pie all ready to go into the oven. And we will cook this at 400 degrees for 35 minutes or so, 35 to 40 minutes.
When you freeze it and then you reheat it, do you defrost it first or do you go right from freezer to oven?
I do go right from freezer to oven with just about a half an hour in between. So I would like it to kind of settle just, get rid of some of that frost for, half an hour to an hour and then stick it in the oven. But I'm sure you could do it either way. It just is going to take slightly longer the colder it is. And I will wrap it really well. So I don't want any aluminum foil to touch my food. So I would put a layer of plastic over it and then tightly wind it, kind of wrap some aluminum foil around it with a barrier of that or wax paper in between. And then when I'm ready to bake, it bakes uncovered. And so we're going to just put this into this fresh version into a 400-degree oven for 35 to 40 minutes. Or if you had a frozen one, it would take about 90 minutes at 375. And this is what it looks like. I just pulled this out of the oven. I've got 2 beautiful pans ready with shepherd's pie. And so this version, this first one, I just did in 2 pie pans just to show you. And, it's just lovely on a buffet. So this will be a lovely main dish, and we'll plate this in just a moment. We've got 35 seconds left on our Brussels sprouts. So we'll see how these are doing.
You're going to have
We're going to give it just another moment or so for our green vegetable that we're going to add to our plate. I'm just going to move this out of our way. And the next thing we're going to make while we've got our 2 vegetables along with our shepherd's pie is something delicious with cranberries. And this is one of my favorites. So we're going to turn this off. We are done with our Brussels sprouts.
I think you could serve that dish with cranberry sauce if you wanted to, I bet.
Absolutely. And that's what we're going to make next is a cranberry sauce.
I'm psychic.
You saw this coming. Yes.
I was just thinking it would go really well together.
So, we've got our Brussels sprouts all ready. I'm just going to get these out of the steamer so they don't overcook. And I'm just shoveling them into a lovely serving dish. And then we'll take a peek at them and allow them to kind of settle so they don't keep cooking. And this is another delicious, simple add-on to whatever you're serving because it's so fresh and beautiful. But I like to maybe drizzle it with either a little bit of smoked salt if you use salt, a little smoked hickory balsamic, one of my favorites from California Balsamic. I just love this. You could, put a little dash of something crunchy on top. You could even put some toasted breadcrumbs, but I'm just going to drizzle it with a little bit of balsamic, the smoked one, the curry one, and they're all good. And if you wanted to, a little bit of black pepper or some red pepper flakes or a little cayenne, and we've got a lovely side dish ready to go. So we'll move that aside as well. And then we are ready to make one of my favorite sweet endings to a meal. And this is a cranberry sauce, and you can certainly have it as a condiment along with the meal, or you can serve it as a dessert. So here we go. We are going to put into a food processor 12 ounces of rinsed, dried, I'm saying dried, I don't mean dry, I mean fresh cranberries that have been rinsed and towel dried. So I'm going to put those into our food processor. And then I'm going to put in 2/3 of a cup of dates. This is a raw cranberry sauce. It's not cooked like so many cranberry sauces are.
And it takes a lot less time to make.
Less time to make, and I think more delicious.
I agree.
And then the next thing we're going to do is get our fruit ready. I've got 2 apples and an orange, and we're going to add all of those to our menu, to our food processor. So I'm just taking a shortcut here. You could peel these if you wanted to. I'm going to just kind of slice off some of that outside. We want to get rid of the core. I don't necessarily recommend doing it this way because you are, getting rid of some of the apple, but it's just such a quick way to do it. I told a story not too long ago about this, and I made this dish literally for 100 people who needed to sample it once. And that's when I decided I didn't want to peel them. My arm got too tired to peel. So I just came up with this shortcut to cut the apple in this way, where I didn't have to spend too much time on each one. You can imagine how many apples and oranges were involved when I had to make sure that there were 100 samples. So I'm just taking big chunks of apple without the core, without the peel, and I'm just prepping it for this bowl for us to rough chop this mixture together. And what's so delightful about this is that it adds something crispy, a little sweet, a little tart, a little sour from the orange. That's just kind of a combo of sweet and tart. You know, you wouldn't have to do a perfect job on this peel if you didn't want to. We'll just get rid of most of it here. And then some just big chunks, rough chop of the apple. Again, just making sure we've got nice big shapes to put into here. And I'm going to do the same thing basically with this orange, is just taking a shortcut with getting rid of the outer peeling. You could certainly take the time to, you know, segment it and do, you know, get this a little cleaner, but I find it doesn't matter that much. I don't mind a little bit of this inside. It adds kind of a nice combo. So we're just going to take this orange and kind of rough chop this orange as well and throw it into our food processor. And that is how easy our prep is. And now I'm just going to turn this on for a couple of quick pulses. And we are literally done. So we're going to plate that as well. And so we have our dinner all ready to go. And so let me show you how pretty this is going to look on a plate.
It's barely been 30 minutes and you have like a feast.
So, you know, and this, you could certainly add to this, but we get a nice start with 4 courses with this meal. And so here's how easy it's going to be. I just love how this all looks together.
Yeah, the colors.
I'm going to take this beautiful, I know, right? I just love these colors. So we've got this beautiful lentil shepherd's pie that is just full of lentils and spinach and vegetables. And it's just all so yummy and good with this creamy mashed potatoes that gets nice and golden and kind of crispy on the top. And then we want to add to that some delicious Brussels sprouts.
I mean, this is a feast. And when I think of what some people eat for the holidays, it's not any more delicious.
And the thing about this food, as you know, is it makes you feel so good when you're eating it. And after, you know, I have often noticed that at Thanksgiving, when we're sitting around a table of people who eat all different things, not all the same as I do, every single time people say when they're done eating, oh my gosh, I ate too much, I don't feel good, something like that. Someone's always feeling like they don't feel great after the food they ate from the dinner that they eat when it's not this kind of food. If it's, you know, plant-based, wonderful food like this, it just makes you feel great. And so we've got our plate full of butternut squash and onions, Brussels sprouts, and lentil shepherd's pie, and we're ready for a delicious meal. And so as a dessert, I like to serve this cranberry mixture either as a dessert, or you could really add it along, as Chef AJ said, along with the plate, right on the same plate if you wanted to. But I'm going to just show you what it's like if you don't. I like to have this as just a fresh dessert.
You know what that would be good?
We've got
a banana ice cream.
Absolutely. So we've got our cranberry, apple, orange, and dates all blended together for this delicious dessert. And this is really good. Absolutely would be wonderful if you could put this on oatmeal in the morning. You can put a little granola on the top. It's just a really nice, delicious treat. So here's our meal.
I cannot believe it. How did you do it so quickly?
Thank you. The secret is multitasking. If you have a couple things happening at once, the work happens for you. If you got something in the oven, something in the pressure cooker, something on the stove, it lets you get everything done just about the same time. So
wow, that is amazing.
that's our
Hey,
menu.
tell us a little bit about your book. Tell us, like, what do you know what it's called? Can you share that with us, or what the recipe
I do.
like?
I do. And it's going to be available for pre-order very soon. It's called the Plant-Based for Life Cookbook. And I'm very excited about it. It's going to have over 100 recipes and all full color photos for everyone. And it's going to be really beautiful. So we're getting very close. It's in formatting right now and ready to hopefully order very soon.
Well, I can't wait.
In fact, if
the minute
people follow me on my blog, they'll hear about updates as well.
Yeah, and the minute it comes out, let me know, because we want like to have you back so you can actually hold it up and maybe make a recipe from it. Did you take the photos yourself for the book?
I did. Yep, all the photos are I took myself, and all the recipes I'm really excited about. So can't wait to share.
Wow, that is going to be amazing. So this is a lot of food, Vicki. There's probably going to be leftovers. So what do you do with it?
There's so many ideas I have about what to do with leftovers, and I'd love to share that with you as well. So I got some ideas about what we can do with those.
Can you come back tomorrow and show us what you do with the leftovers?
I would love to.
Well, that would be amazing. And where do you like people to follow you? I mean, obviously they can sign up for your blog, and we'll have that information in the show notes below, but do you hang out at all on any of the different social media platforms?
So I'm on Facebook and Instagram, as well as my blog, which is Ann Arbor Vegan Kitchen.com. So yeah, any of those places, follow me for updates about my book and for new recipes as they come out. And just love to hear from all of your viewers and share ideas back and forth.
Well, this has been spectacular, and I cannot believe how quickly you got this meal together. So
now everyone has time to make their holiday meal.
Right. And people say, oh, it takes so long to cook healthy. No, it doesn't. Not if you do some prep and you had a few great shortcuts, like the butternut squash being cut up in advance, which I do because I have a bad thumb, and it's really hard to cut butternut squash. I got to tell you.
I do too. I've had tendonitis in my thumb and in my wrist. So I have to be kind of careful as well. And so, yeah, I like shortcuts like that as well. Definitely helps. All of those things, all the fresh food, the more the better. And so, yes, if we can take some shortcuts and have some of the washing already done for us before we get to it, and some of the cutting, it just makes it easy for assembly and makes things doable.
Absolutely. When I think about all the people that I know in my groups that probably are going to go off plan today with some temptation, it's like, you can eat such an amazing, delicious, healthy meal. I mean, to me, that is beautiful food, and it's very tempting, and it's not going to hurt you. And you don't have to wake up, bloated and sick because you ate something. I mean, this is amazing. People just know how good this tastes.
And feeling bad. I mean, and feeling bad about your choices. I mean, it's just, I think if we can think about choices that we make today that will help us feel good about them tomorrow, we're that much farther ahead. And so sometimes it takes that big view of what we're deciding today to make sure that it's a good choice for us. So yeah, and as you know too, the food you eat is the food you start to crave. And so when you're eating whole foods like this that are full of flavor, this is the food you crave. You wake up in the morning after you eat vegetables for breakfast like you do, and I do as well. And that's what you want first thing. You want those vegetables, but when you're eating a Snickers bar, that's what is on your radar. So yeah, if you can sort of subtly make the shift to more healthy choices and help yourself not get derailed over the holidays, because it just makes it that much harder to get back on track later, you'll thank yourself. It's the best favor you can give yourself.
Absolutely. Best holiday gift you can give yourself. I've never met anybody that has regretted not going off plan. And like you say, it's so true. What you eat today, you crave tomorrow.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh my God, this has been wonderful. I can't wait to see what you're going to do with these leftovers tomorrow. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas to you and your family. Thank you so much, Vicki. You are just amazing.
My pleasure to be with you all. See you tomorrow.
Yeah. And thanks to all of you for watching another episode of Chef AJ Live. Please come back tomorrow, because you have to see what Vicki is going to do to repurpose these leftovers. Take care, everybody, and Merry Christmas.